misconception both of what gets attributed to Deming and what actually happens within Toyota. So this is what currently is the model within Toyota. It's called Toyota Business Practices. In 2001, the Toyota Way was introduced with two pillars: respect for people and continuous improvement, and they work hand in hand. That is, you can't expect people to put their minds into continuously improving processes in addition to doing the job, performing those processes, unless they feel like a member of the team, trusted, respected, and then that respect then allows you to give people very challenging goals that may even seem punitive, but in a trusting environment, there's an understanding that the goals are challenges, and the purpose of the challenge is to help the company as well as to develop yourself, to do something that currently you don't think is possible with your current capabilities and the capabilities of your team. What we see in the Toyota Business Practice model is two columns. This came out again after the Toyota Way 2001, so 2002, 2003. This was introduced as the concrete method by which the Toyota Way principles would be put into action. There was a recognition that the principles by themselves weren't actionable. And this is the way Toyota is going to practice its business. So let me repeat that. Way all of Toyota globally, hundreds of thousands of people, over 1 million people if you include dealers, the way they will practice their business, any part of their business, whether it's selling or building a new plant or designing a new car or making a fundamental innovation in battery technology or moving a flow rack a few inches so that there's less walking time. So from the very tiny little problem to global breakthrough in the world of automotive. In all those cases, they are going to follow Toyota business practices. And what it amounts to is PDCA. And furthermore, it's defined as 8 steps. So it's taught in these 3-day seminars as kind of a nice tool to use that we hope you use back when you go back to work, is the way we do business at Toyota in everything we do. Very fundamental difference in the place of this, say, methodology and way of thinking, and Toyota will think about it more as a way of thinking than as a methodology. And you see there's 2 columns. This is from Toyota. One is, these are the concrete actions and processes. This is what you're going to do. And then there's a drive and dedication column, which is, these are the values. This is what you're going to learn. This is what you're going to develop as a leader. So you can look at the drive and dedication as a description of what leaders need to learn to be better leaders. And they're going to learn it by, on a regular basis, over and over again, going through PDCA and performing concrete actions to improve processes. In the 8 steps, we see that you first have to clarify the problem, and Toyota has a very simple definition of a problem, which is it's a gap. It's a gap between what should be happening and what is happening. It's as simple as that. Now, it's not entirely that simple because, for one thing, you have to define what should be happening. And that means spending some time thinking about this workplace or this new vehicle or this new brand. And with that brand, what is the purpose and what should be happening, and what should be happening at the starting point should be defined in terms of the ideal state. What would be the ideal state if we were 100% successful? And then you'll back off and create a target that's more realistic. And then the gap between that target and the actual is then a problem. There are other types of definitions of problems, like what should be happening is we should not be having defects, and we have a defect. So there's a gap between 0 defects and 1 defect, and that's another problem. In that case, that's a deviation from the current expectation for production. In the case, say, we talked about the Scion model or Scion brand development in the course. In the Scion brand, there was a gap between the desired age of the people who buy Toyota Lexus vehicles in North America and the actual age. That was the problem they were trying to solve. So the current age was what it was, and the desired age became an aspiration. You could also look at zero defects as an aspiration. You can look at a certain mix of vehicles that will balance the line to have a certain percentage of Camrys for every Avalon, and that's the way we run production today. And when we deviate from that, that's a problem. We're not improving anything by keeping that balance, but we're trying to maintain that level. And in fact, it's challenging to maintain that level. So it's actually a target to maintain that, say 80% Avalon and 20%, 80% Camry and 20% Avalon. So the problem is going to be as tough as you make it, and the toughness will be what is your target, and it's often referred to as a standard. What is the standard you're trying to move to accomplish? And then the gap is the problem. But the gap is often very large, like a gap like we're at this age of buyers, we want to be at this age of buyers, it's actually like this. That's extremely difficult to do, and it's not clear what you should do. So what you need to do is you need to break that problem down into smaller pieces. What are some of the actions we can take to reduce that gap? And one of those actions turned out to be create a new brand. And then that had to be broken down further into what that brand would look like. And when you have subdivided the problem into smaller problems, into smaller, not hundreds, but maybe half dozen or so smaller problems, then for each of those problems, you're going to then set a target that's concrete and specific. Then you're going to ask yourself, why are we far away from that target? And you'll ask why 5 times and drive to the root cause. Then you're going to develop a number of countermeasures that might possibly help you close the gap or reduce the gap. And it may take a combination of countermeasures to close the gap. It usually does. And the term countermeasures is distinct from solutions because none of these, at this point, none of these ideas is a solution. We don't know if it's going to work or not. It's just a hypothesis. And we test the hypothesis, then we monitor what happens, we analyze. As we're putting the countermeasure in place, we're checking continually. And finally, we standardize successful processes, and also we then think about the next step. What's the next problem we want to work on in the PDCA loop? Now you can see on the right that you're really learning the way of thinking, the behaviors, the skills required for lean leadership, which starts with putting the customer first, always confirming the purpose, understanding why you're doing what you're doing, taking ownership and responsibility, being able to visualize the problem, because we're visual creatures, and we want to visualize whether we're in standard or out of standard. We want to make judgments based on facts, not emotions or just opinions. We want to think and act very persistently because we have this target, and we're not going to give up until we reach that target, and we'll try endless things until we finally get to the target. When you know what you want to do and you've taken the time to plan it out, you want to put it in place really fast so you can run the experiment very fast. You're going to follow each process through with sincerity and commitment, so that will lead to sustainment, not putting it in place. You like do a Kaizen burst, you follow up for a few weeks, and you disappear. We need to thoroughly communicate with all our key stakeholders and involve them so they're all engaged in the process. So that's a nice description of what a lean leader should do, and the way you do it is by doing steps 1 through 8. And I would argue that steps 1 through 8, if you look at the detail, all include what this other person had said was the Deming model. Another